I'm Tina and I'm the author of Wings to Soar. And I'm going to take you on a tour of the places where I wrote this book. So stay tuned, come along with me, and let's see where all this magic happened. This is where I have a lot of my books. It's a really small little sitting room that we have in the house. But I absolutely love it because I find it inspiring to be surrounded by books. This space in particular is where I wrote this first draft of this book, where I did sort of the research for it and all of those pieces because I could spread out and have everything in here. Oh my gosh, the research of this book was so interesting. So the setting of this story takes place at Greenham Common, which is an Air Force base that was being used by the United States military at that time. And so half of the base was for the airmen and the other half of the base was for the Ugandan Asians as a resettlement camp. So in doing my research, it was my husband that actually said you should go online on Facebook and see if there is a group. And there was a Greenham Common Air Corps group, airmen. And I asked if I could join. I told them what I was doing. Some of them weren't quite sure, but I shared what I was writing about and asked if I could just periodically listen to what they were talking about, ask my own questions. And they were so kind, so sweet to let me join and listen and look through the history, listen to their chats, read through it. It was very generous of them. Well, like I said, the main character is probably closest to some of my experiences when you look at some of the hardships she faced, because in England at that time, there was a big anti-immigration movement, so there was a lot of racism going on at that point in time. But at the same time, it's also based off different family members' experiences, friends that I talked to, people that I researched. But the best part of this book is Officer Graham. And the reason he is very special to me is I met him through that Facebook group. And the more he shared his stories with me, and he was a young police officer at the time on the base. So he got to meet some of the Asian immigrants that had come over and were staying there. He shared photographs with me, he shared stories with me, and I came to like him so much and appreciate him so much that I made a character after him. And I asked his permission. And so Officer Graham in the story is based off my inspirations from him. And that means such a lot to me. And I actually ended up dedicating the book to him. Welcome to my sitting room. This is another of the places where I would sit and write, and probably one of my favorites because it's so comfortable. Usually have a cup of tea. Usually I'd have snacks with it, and this is where I'd sit with my computer, and I always had a paper and pen for ideas. So in Wings to Soar, this is a very personal book for me. I think Viva, who is the main character of the book, is probably closest to my experiences, both in a combination of England and Canada. And so this was a very personal story, and she is the one probably I identified with the most. So she has bits of me, bits of my personal history, my inner child, embroiled with what she went through in this story. The music portion of this book was so much fun for me and actually helped me get through a lot of the difficult scenes to write. So in this book, the character is inspired by Diana Ross. And so Viva channels her inner Diana's supremeness, because Diana Ross was one of the key members of the Supremes. And so I integrated music like Ain't No Mountain High Enough to show that she can overcome anything. She would sing Someday We'll Be Together because she never gives up hope. that she will be reunited with her father. And so this room, actually, the sitting room, because there's a lot of room here, is where I would blast my Diana Ross music, I would sing, and it would help open up my own creativity to really hear Viva's voice. So when you're reading, you'll see those passages, and I would love if you would go back and start listening to some of that music. It will make a difference as you're reading the book. I finished writing the book in April, which is why I have a sweater, because I would sit out here either in the early hours of the morning to write before I went to school, or sometimes later in the evening. And when I sat on weekends, my dog Butler, who was a black lab, would sit right here and keep me company. But this was probably one of my happier places to write, or if I was struggling with scenes or had tough scenes to write, this was a nice place because I was out in nature. I had written a book about how Asian Indians were given 90 days to leave the country. They had to leave their home, their belongings, their friends. And when I visited schools and I visited kids, students would ask me, well, what happened afterwards? Where did they go? And I wanted to write a story centered on one student, one child, and her family, and what that experience was like after they'd ended up and landed in a completely new country. What did they face? What experiences did they have? What were the people like that they met? And that was probably one of the big reasons that I wanted to. I also grew up in England around that same time, and it was a place for me to dive into my inner child and bring in some of those experiences as well. This is fun. So the line for the book, the very first line, is called I Have a Name, and it's actually the title of the second poem in the book. And the title was Everything. The idea that your name is personal to you. It's about your identity, it's about who you are, and it really encapsulates and grabs everything about you. And this is why my character she channels Diana's supremeness and all that kind of bigness. And her name is Viva, which in Portuguese means full of life, which is what she is. And so out of that line, I have a name, and knowing what her name was, the story grew from there with regards to your identity, who you are, and holding on to the fact that you have a name, not a label. And that was important for me in this book. Welcome to my final spot. This isn't a place where I actually would write, but this is where I would come to play the piano when I was frustrated, or I had writer's block, or I needed to feel some of what Viva was feeling, and so I would play one of the songs from the Supremes and sing. And I would only do that when there was nobody else at home, so nobody could hear me. But it was a good space for me. Oh my gosh, there is so much cool about this book. But the best thing is the characters. You have Viva, who is full of life, and nothing is going to stop her or get her down. You have these two friends she meets, Mark and Maggie, who are from England and completely different personalities and fun and quirky in their own way. And then you know that Officer Graham is based off a real person, so that is fun and interesting. And then all the airmen that I got to listen to what they were talking about on that Facebook group, I took all of them and mixed them into one person to create a character in the book, an American airman that befriends Viva. So I think these characters are fun and they are quirky, and I can't wait for you to meet them. And then the best part is the book jacket turns into a poster for you.